Hello, my friends. We're going to be talking about Virgil today. It's a Monday afternoon, and there are just a bunch of things that I want to touch on. Here today, we're going to be talking about themes that arise in books one and two. And when I say we're talking about themes, that means I expect you to already know what's happened in the work. Um, so this is a shift in the class from excuse me, Greek culture to Roman culture is a major thing. It's a geographical shift, it's a linguistic shift, and a cultural shift. Because the I don't, Greece isn't the same place as Italy, so I don't think I need to spend too much time on that. And of course, the language shifts from Greek to Latin, which means, by the way, let me just make this clear to you right now. Um, I expect you to be able to identify the Greek gods by their Greek names and the Roman gods by their Latin names. So you're going to see questions on your exam where I ask you about Greek texts, and I might throw curveballs at you, or I might do the same thing with the Latin texts that we read. Too bad for you. Pay attention to detail. And then there's also a cultural shift. It's cultural slash political. Um, uh, um, the Greek world tended to be organized in the city-state organization system. So you had your local community, and you were autonomous within your local community. When you get to the Romans, especially by Virgil's time, it's different earlier in Roman history, but certainly by Virgil's time, I haven't got to that yet. I will in just a second. It's more a kind of I don't know how to say it exactly, but it's kind of more of a national identity of Romanness. Um, it, it's complicated. So, but by Virgil's time, there's this definite idea of uh, Romanness, and because by Virgil's dates are roughly about, roughly about 70 BCE to roughly about, you get various dates between 20 and 15 BCE. Um, and it's during that time that Rome saw that was the building of the empire. So we think of the Roman Empire, and when we think of the Roman Empire, or when we think of ancient Rome, we think of the Roman Empire, but we have to remember that Rome had already been a republic for some several hundred years before that, at least 500 or 600 years before that. By the way, you'll notice I put a shirt on, trim my beard. I can't get a haircut because no barbers are open. Um, I only did that because my mom thinks I look like a slob. So, so there's that. But anyway, so Rome by Virgil, by the time that Virgil is writing, Rome is in the transitional period between the Republic and the Empire. And what that means for us is that Rome, Rome had a, and Rome. I'm using that as the broadest right. So Rome and Romans had this idea of themselves as being self-determining, electing their officials. Um, Citizens had as much say as aristocrats did. We all know how far that goes. Um, but at least you had the structure, the governmental structure, and then by the time you get down to the Virgil's day, things are shifting. The Republic fell apart. I'm not going to go too much into detail about this because frankly, I'm not going to test you on it. And so I don't necessarily think that I need to spend much time on it. But the Roman Empire lasted for a long time, and it started to break down in the time period after a series of wars that they had with the Carthaginians. This series of wars is called the Punic Wars. You can look up the details on them. In fact, I encourage you to look up the details on them. If we were together, I'd get more into detail on this, but I don't want to make your life more miserable. um, so, by the time we hit about 60 or 50 BCE, so remember, the Roman Republic begins sometime around 500 BCE. I haven't seen a convincing date for any one particular date, but it's in that range. So did I say 50 BCE? 500 BCE. Sometime around 500 BCE, the Roman Republic begins, and it lasts for a long time, but it breaks down because of. All right, geez, I said I wasn't going to get into this, but it begins to break down because I'm going to try to put this as succinctly as I possibly can. The aristocrats get really wealthy, and they gather private armies to themselves. And as they gather private armies to themselves, they all make power grabs, and so the general sense of the class system of Rome. Okay, now I'm going to get into this. So there's three. Traditionally, there are three classes in ancient Rome. So at the top of the social ladder, you have the patricians, right? This is still a word that we use in English to this day. And then in the middle, it's not really a middle class. It's more sort of like a lower upper class. This is why I always say to you that I hate using modern distinctions for ancient distinctions because they don't map perfectly. But you have the class of people who were rich enough that they could own a horse. These people were called the equites. So patricians they're the people who own all the land. The equites are people who make enough money to be able to own a horse, and that's no small thing. That's a big deal. Horses are expensive to own. We know this from having read The Clouds by Aristophanes, where owning horses is an expensive proposition. And then at the bottom you have the plebeians, or the plebeian class, which makes up the mass of the population, which I'm sure surprises none of you. I forget why I'm talking about this now. So in this system, I know what I'm talking about because we're talking about the Roman Republic. This class system developed under the Republican system of government for a very long time. Only people from the patrician class could be elected to upper office. And in fact, that won't change. That doesn't change. Even it might change legally. I don't know. Please don't quote me on that. But in effect, in actual reality, it's the patricians who are elected until we get into this transitional period between the Republic and the Empire, when just guys who can raise military forces take over. All right. Okay. So let me not get too deep into this. Virgil lives in that time period where the Republic turns into the Empire. The Republic had already failed conservatively, um, 90 years earlier, but really logistically about 200 years earlier. But in any case, the Republic started to fail. And so you started to get this dynamic of wealthy dudes who could raise their own private armies, and they moved in, and then you had a series of dictators, and we'll come back to that term in a minute, and then you end up with the empire. And the empire is what most people think about when they think about Rome, ancient Rome, because that's the most popular. Nobody makes movies about the Roman Republic or TV shows about the Roman Republic. They make TV shows and movies about the Roman Empire because, like, Rome, the empire, the emperor's got lots of money, has lots of sex, and throws lots of parties and all those like kind of sort of stereotypical cliches about ancient Rome, which are not all true, of course, but have made their way into popular culture by this stage. So Virgil's right. Virgil's born round about 70 BCE. And this is the period where the last of the great warlords, Julius Caesar, rolls in, and having made all of his so Julius Caesar made all these great conquests. He seemed, and I use that term pointedly, seemed to have brought the Germanic provinces under control. He didn't. Germany, what we call Germany, which spans like modern, like the way that we identify countries now, is not. It's not just geographically or modern Germany. It obviously includes Austria and Czechoslovakia, and anything that's north of the Danube River was Germania. Um, uh, but he was a conquering hero. He was hugely popular. He was a very good writer. He wrote his own press releases, and so when he came back to Rome, Rome is run by the Senate. And the Senate is this traditional Republican body that's supposed to be representatives of the people. It's not. But the Senate tells Julius Caesar that, like, if you come back to Rome and you bring your army with you, then we're not going to recognize you. Like, we're not going to recognize your conquests. And Julius Caesar is just basically says F you to the whole Senate and comes back with his army. And there really isn't anything that the Senate can do about it because they don't have an army. And so Julius Caesar takes over. Anyway, to make a long story short, this is, what year is this? This is like, I can't remember exactly off the top of my head. But in any case, in 44 BCE, Julius Caesar is told by the Senate that he can be dictator. Now, this was not the same. It doesn't mean the same thing as your English word dictator means, right? So dictator in Latin literally means a person who says things. And so the dictator was the person who gives orders. So this was like an extension of the top political office, but it only lasted for as long as your political office lasted for. So let me get into that just for a moment. The top political office in Rome was the censor, um, uh, and so like you get that office, and the office is only. Wait, did I get that right, or did I screw that up? I feel like I screwed that up right now. All right, okay, never mind. I'll come back to it. I don't care if you know the term or not. So you got elected to the top political office. They elected two of them every year, and your term was only supposed to last for 1 year. And then you had to face re-election. But of course, given political machinations, many of these politicians managed to string their office holding out, over. It's not cancer. God, it's gonna bother me now. Shit. Um, 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 that was cancer was a political office for sure. Uh, Damn it! I can't believe I can't think of it right now. God, I feel like I'm in a pub quiz where I can't come up with the right answer over a topic that I ought to know. Um, uh, Console. That's what it is. Got it. Yes. It took me a while. Took me a minute, but I did get it. Please forgive me. So the top offices is the consul. The Kensor was actually another sometimes relevant, sometimes not relevant political office that plebeians were actually allowed to hold. But the consul belonged to the patricians, to the top class. Um, but if you got elected to be consul, your time in office was only supposed to be 1 year. Um, and But like I said, you could string it out over multiple years, given your political astuteness, uh, and it changes over time. And I'm not going to get into the weeds on that because it's not appropriate to what we're covering in this class, because we do have to get onto the Aeneid. I'm just trying to build up is the kind of cultural political background to where Virgil comes from, um, and what was going on in his own day. Virgil himself was of the patrician class, so it wasn't like he was you know it wasn't like he was a working class kid. I'm sorry. Sometimes I have to check my tongue. Uh, um, so Virgil is writing. Like I say, he's born in the 70s. So by the time he's in his 20s, in the 50s and the 40s, that's when Julius Caesar gets assassinated. Because he comes back as this conquering hero. The Roman people love him. In fact, there was more or less a two-party system in the ancient Rome voting system. The optimates, the best people, and then the populares, the people, the rest of everybody else. And so you can understand how they're just from their names. You can optimates, best people. I'm not going to write down again. I'm not going to ask you. You can look it up. So optimates, the best people, and then the populares, the rest of everybody else. And Caesar courted and was extremely popular with the populares, which made the rest of the senatorial class very nervous about him, because he was extremely popular, and not only was he already an extremely accomplished general with a very powerful army, but it seemed like he could marshal, um, other people, he could make a he could construct a massive movement if he put his mind to it. So they killed him. He gets back in, I think, around about 60 BCE. Um, Again, don't quote me on that. But by 45, 44 BCE, the Senate has no choice but to make him consul. And they give him the extended power of the dictator, or the dictator. I'm not going to write it out because it's spelled the same way in Latin than it is in English. Um, uh, and what that word means is the person who gives orders. And but that's only supposed to last as long as your elected office is. But Caesar then turns around and says, "Well, I'll accept being dictator, but it's not just going to be for 1 year. It's going to be for the rest of my life." And it is. He does live out the rest of his life as consul and dictator, but it only lasts about 5 or 6 more months because he's killed by a group of senators whose at least ostensible motive is that Caesar wants to make himself a king. And Rome doesn't have kings. Rome got rid of their king. So Rex, right? Rex is the Latin word for king, as in regal, royal. Those are all derivatives from this Latin word of Rex. Anyway, he's assassinated, and when he's assassinated, he doesn't have any legitimate children to take over for him. He has children, but none that the Romans would accept as being fully legitimate because their moms are not Roman. So what he did was he adopted one of his. Let me see if I get this right. I think he was his grand nephew, just in terms of like bloodline. But at that point in time, his name was Octavian. But Octavian was only 18 when Caesar got assassinated. So there was a power struggle between him and, between he and a guy by the name of Mark Antony, who, of course, would later rise to fame by living La Vida Loca. But, so Mark Antony had been Caesar's one of his principal lieutenants in his military campaign. So Mark Antony felt that he had a claim to a certain percentage of Caesar's army, and therefore a claim on power in Rome. And then there was a third guy. So Caesar, Antony, and who's the third guy? No, I can't remember. No, wait, I got this wrong. I totally got this wrong. It's Caesar, Julius Caesar, and Pompeius, and a guy by the name of Crassus. Pompey and Crassus had been generals, but they were older at this stage and didn't have the, compete level at this point with Julius Caesar. And they basically eliminate each other one by one. Okay, yeah, never mind. No details. I'm not going to ask you about this, so I won't get into it. So, but then Caesar's assassinated, but then his adopted son, Octavian, inherits all of Caesar's authority and wealth, and most of his military, not all of his military. Some of it goes with Mark Antony, but or went with Mark Antony, and that's how you made. I mean, that's how you made your political capital in Rome at this particular point in time. Is you needed to have a private army. If you didn't have a private army, then you know, go away. No one cares about you. So so, but then we get into the second phase of the process where you have Octavian, another dude by the name of Lepidus, and the third guy is Pompey Caesar Crassus, is Mark Antony, and there's just this conflict over, who gets what, and why do you get this, and why don't I get that, and so Mark Antony, gets pissed off, and I mean, okay, so I'll make a long story short. Octavian comes out victorious. A lot of that has to do with the fact that he had cold cash money and could just shell it out so that he could buy more soldiers, buy more popular support, his family money. I mean, I'm sure there are other versions, other analyses that would give a different interpretation on them, and I'm not going to discount that, but that's my reading. Octavian bought, well, so to speak, he bought the throne, but remember, it can't be a throne because the Romans, they don't have a king, right? That's the national. That's the national. That's the national self-conception, right? Other places have kings. We don't have kings. We get to choose our own leaders. We're still a republic. Even at this point, even though by this point the republic is completely broken. It's totally broken. There's no more fair elections. There's no more, voice that the popular people have unless they want to riot, which does happen from time to time. Though not that I can think of under Octavian's reign. I could be wrong on that. To look that up. But they do riot from time to time. But that's like all you have as somebody who is not from the patrician class, cannot aspire to holding public office or forming. Now it changes. It will change over time, but over a longer period of time. So, but for right now, we're locked into Virgil's cultural moment. So Octavian in 27 BCE is declared emperor, imperator. I'll try to keep this on the page. You guys know I suck at this. So in Rome, you can't talk about your leader being a king or a rex, because in the traditional history of Rome, they had a monarchy, but they exiled their kings so that they could establish the republic. And hey, everybody still says we have a republic, even though everyone knows they actually don't. So he's not Rex, but he is Imperator. Yeah. Which is the root of our English word emperor. And when he is declared imperator, I didn't even mention how he managed to defeat his rivals. Maybe we'll talk about that later. But he changes his name because, of course, that's what you do when you assume supreme power. So in 27 BCE, Octavian becomes the Emperor Augustus. So before he's imperator, we refer to him as Octavian. After 27 BCE, we refer to him as Augustus. Because you can. And anecdotally, Virgil and Augustus went to school together, and Virgil wanted to be a politician, and Octavian wanted to be a poet. Talk about histories of irony, or histories of irony, ironies of history. I mean, you get these anecdotes, and you're never quite sure how true they are, because sometimes they seem just that little bit too convenient. But in any case, let's get down to Virgil and let's get down to book one. I got bogged down in Roman history now. I made all these notes and then I wrote over the top of all of them. So we talked about the shift in geography. Well, we didn't talk about the shift in geography. That doesn't need to be explained. Greece to Rome. Okay, fine. Shift in language, Greek to Latin. Okay, fine. But what's kind of more central is a cultural shift between what we've been talking about in the ancient Greek world and what we talk about in the Latin world. In the sense that the Romans, so look, I know I'm going back and forth between Roman and Latin. Latin is the name of the language. Rome is the name of the city-state. So when I talk about the people collectively, I'm going to use the term Roman. When I talk about the language that they speak, I'm going to use the word Latin. Okay, but they're not. It's the same thing. It's just two different names for something, or not. Yeah, right. Not one something, but two different names for two different things. Just like to draw a parallel, I'm an American, but I speak English. So you get the Romans, but they speak Latin. Okay, so please don't be confused by that shift back and forth. I now feel like I've confused you. I often feel like when I try to explain something that shouldn't confuse you, I end up confusing you more. But yeah, you know how to get a hold of me. But the culture shift is very important because the Romans basically adopt, I wouldn't say all, like it would be incorrect to say that they adopt all of the Greek cultural models, but it is correct to say that they adopt a lot of the Greek cultural models, in particular when it comes to their literature, and what they write and how they write. And also in terms of their religion, their religious belief, they basically take all of they not all is the wrong term, but they take a ton of the Greek pre-existing Greek myths and they just take them as their own. They just retranslate them into Latin, which means a bunch of name changes. Which is why I said earlier the myths are going to be more or less the same, but the names change, and there's a whole explanation behind that, which I'm not going to get into right now. But of course, the Romans picked and chose out of the Greek cultural template what they were going to take for their own. So they liked some of the myths, they liked some of the gods, they liked some of the cultural models, but then there was other things that they didn't like. Why didn't they like? Why did they like some and not others? Well, when you conquer another people, you get to take what you want from them and leave behind what you don't want. And the Romans by Virgil's day, were already dominant in the Greek world, um, in the geography of what even now what you think of as like Greece as a place on the map, and so hey, they got to choose. I mean, it was they got to choose, and so they chose some things and they left other things behind, or more like I think more specifically, they chose things. They chose to adopt things that mapped onto their cultural matter, while at the same time um, demonizing or otherizing elements of the pre-existing Greek cultural model. So now we got to talk about this cultural process, which is how you turn another person who is not from the same place as you are, looks different, talks different, has a different religion, is not the same gender, anything that you find different about another person, how you turn them into the other. And so the Romans otherized the Greeks to a large extent. Which, look, this is not value judgment in any sense, because the Greeks otherized lots of other races. So I'm not saying the Greeks were like, well, they were open-minded in some respects, but like, I'm not saying that they were like, morally, blameless. I'm not saying that at all. But we can look at this with the Romans because it's going to be relevant to when we talk about Virgil and the Aeneid, because obviously Virgil just writes like Homer, or I shouldn't say writes like Homer, but is trying to pick up this literary torch from Homer. We'll come out there's going to be a lot more detail. I'm sorry. I do get animated. So there's going to be a lot more details on that front, just in a moment. So, the Romans liked a lot of aspects of, well, they love Greek myth, so they adopted Greek myth. They changed the names. There's a dynamic behind the name change. It's not just a language shift. There's also another cultural shift that happens here too, but again, not relevant for our discussion. Um, but they really like Greek myth, so they pretty much took it all on board. Um, and But there were other things that they thought the Greeks were not. All right, okay. So now we're going to get into this. There's a basic element of Roman self-conception here. Now, again, this is not a value judgment. This is just the thing I'm talking about. Okay, we have very similar um, uh, constructs in the way that we think about ourselves as Americans. The Germans have similar constructs in the way they think about themselves as Germans, the Italians, the English, the Chinese. Uh, pick a nation, and part of the process of being a nation is that you build up a kind of you've heard me use this phrase before. I'm gonna use it again right now. But you build up a foundational mythology, right? You have to have everybody has to be thinking of themselves as basically coming from the same system of ethics, right? Everybody is on the same page when it comes to how you treat each other or whatever, right? So, you go to I'll use a couple terms. I mean, I spent more time in Europe than anywhere else, so I'm going to go back to the European analogies. But like those of you who are non-European can probably imagine something similar. for your cultures, but like, you go back to England and the idea is stiff upper lip, don't complain, take your hardship, because that's what we've always done, right? In America, your foundational mythology is, well, freedom. I won't. Yes, okay, that right. But like things like George Washington didn't cut down the cherry tree, or no, he did, but then he told the truth about it because he said, "I cannot tell a lie." Really? Can't tell a lie? Tell that to the tell that to the indigenous nations. Like you told shit ton of lies to those people. But in any case, you get the point. Like because I mean, it's part of a group identity. It's very important in just getting along with the people that you live next to, that you share some kind of group identity. It's actually more important today than in a long time. But not saying that we have to agree that George Washington never told a lie. Or that President Clinton did not have sex with that woman, Miss Lewinsky. Because, mythologies are built out of, okay, I'll stop talking about America. Let's get back to Rome. Rome, the basic fundamentals of Roman mythology is that they're farmers by nature. They're not. They don't want to they just want to work the land. They don't want to big cities are they're corrupt, and that's where bad things happen. And you don't have to work. You can get by on welfare. So the real Roman owns land and works the land. This gets me back to the patrician class, right, who are gentlemen farmers. So these are dudes who own a lot of land, and they're farmer. I'm sorry, I don't mean to, I know, like I say farmers, and the quotes are overused, but they're not. These are not guys who are going out getting behind the plow. These are guys who, because of the amount of land that they own and the agricultural produce that it gives, can afford to buy a lot of slaves. So these guys are not, I mean, I shouldn't say they're not actual landowners, because they are legally landowners, but it would be more accurate to call them slave owners. I don't even know what I'm talking about this now. I totally went down this tangent. How was I talking about? Augustus as imperator and the rule of the patricians. It's too late for me to try to re-record this because I'm 45 minutes into it. I got 2 more to do today. So, Virgil comes from that same class, basically. Okay, all right. So all right. So othering. I was talking about othering, right? And the cultural relation between Greeks and Romans, and so like the Greeks. Well, okay. I'll hold off. I'll come back to this in just a second, because we got to talk about book 2 of the Aeneid. So what about the Aeneid? The Aeneid is epic poetry. I almost said just the same way that Homer's epic poetry is, but it isn't just the same way. Because the poetry of Homer comes out of the oral epic tradition, whereas Virgil was highly educated and could read and write. This is not the first or the only great work that Virgil wrote. He had 2 bestsellers before this work. And again, this is, anecdotal. Maybe it was true, maybe it wasn't true, but according to the story, Virgil would spend weeks on a single sentence, which was not a luxury that any of the Homeric poets, any of the oral epic poets would have. They'd have to have it, if they didn't have it memorized, they'd have to make it up on the spot. You know, you have the luxury of going back and crossing out words and, changing things. So what we're talking about here is literary epic. And when I say literary epic, like it's easy to sort of like, oh, literature. Like, well, we all know what literature is. I'm not saying that Homer isn't literature. What I'm saying is like this word literally derives from the ability to read and write. Or, in English, literacy. Okay? So the number the number of singers who produced the Iliad were probably not literate. I mean, can't obviously say for sure that none of them were, but the work as a whole shows signs that it was word of mouth rather than one person being able to read or write it. Virgil does not show those signs. Virgil is very carefully crafted. His poetry is very carefully crafted. Now, I'm going to warn you, I'm going to be hard on Virgil in terms of some of his themes because a lot of the Aeneid is pro-Augustus propaganda. I'll wait till we get to the end of the Aeneid to discuss that per se, but you will hear me say about, okay, so look, you look at book one, right? And so this picks up, so the Aeneid picks up where, ostensibly where the Iliad ends, and it's Aeneas, the lesser, by the way, Aeneas was a character in the Iliad who, if you did all your careful reading, you would have read about. But Aeneas is more or less the last surviving hero from Troy who leads a bunch of non-heroes, like, sorry to use the colloquial phrase, but, leads a bunch of joke. Still, like it's like 8 blocks away right now. You can still hear it. I know it's necessary. I know it's necessary. Um, but like, so, Aeneas leads these bunch of, generally otherwise nameless Trojans out of Troy, fleeing the destruction of Troy because he has a greater destiny. Where does his greater destiny come from? Well, his greater destiny comes from his mama, who is the goddess Venus. Her Greek name is Aphrodite, but since we're in Virgil, we're going to use her name Venus. Right, I could tell the whole backstory, but maybe at some later stage I will. But because he's divine by nature, he's sort of, singled out as a hero, and, leads all these other people along with his dad Anchises. Anchises is the mortal who was lucky enough to have sex with Venus. Once, because you only get to have sex with a goddess once, because it ruins you physically, because you're immortal, mortal, right? So Anchises is his dad. Venus, of course, is long gone. Well, she's not long gone at this stage, but so yeah. Anyway, so Aeneas, of course, Aeneas has a wife called Creusa, and they have a child whose name is, he's got different names. Which one should I use? No, that's, Aeolus. Um, oh, how convenient. That, that looks a lot like Julius. So sorry, I didn't mean to take that down so quickly. So Venus and Anchises' child is Aeneas. I don't think we actually are ever told who Creusa's parents are. We might be, and maybe I just missed it. So Aeneas and Venus and Anchises have their boy is Aeneas, and then Aeneas and Creusa, their boy is Aeolus. So they're kind of chosen to be the ones who escape from Troy after it's burned. We got to get into the whole Trojan horse thing. I now realize that this is going to be at least 2 lectures because I'm coming close to an hour and I've barely even begin to talk about book 1 of the Aeneid, which opens up with Aeneas leaving, and there's a Juno. Now remember, Juno is Jupiter's wife. Okay, so Juno in Greek myth is Hera. Jupiter or Jove, those names are used interchangeably. Jupiter or Jove is the Roman name for Zeus. Okay, so Juno wants Aeneas to die. Why? Because he's a Trojan. So, what? Why is that the case? Because Paris did not select her as the most beautiful of all the goddesses. So she's still pissed at all the Trojans and she wants to see them wiped off the face of the map. So she sends a sea storm. That sea storm is eventually calmed down by Neptune, whose Greek equivalent is Poseidon. Same god, same myths, just different names. So Neptune calms the sea at store, and Aeneas is rescued, and then he washes up on the shores of Africa, where he now has 7 ships. So if you remember back to when we talked about Homer way early in the semester when we could still be in the classroom together and all that stuff, I talked a little bit about the number 3 and the importance of number 3 in Homer and how it comes up again and again as a symbol. In Virgil, the number is going to be 7. Why the number 7? The number 7 is, well, I'll leave it for now. I'll come back to it at another stage. But just pay attention to it. Aeneas has to provide for his people, so he goes out and he goes hunting. So so he's a hunter, which means he's providing for his people the way a father would provide for a family. So in Latin, the word for father is pater. Okay, some of you will know this. This is like Spanish padre or French père. So pater is father, the word for the father figure. So he used to go out and provide for everybody. He goes out. One of my favorite, I say favorite. One of the, and there are going to be several scenes in the Aeneid that are just like not plausible, shall we say. Now, of course, there are a lot of scenes in the Iliad that are not plausible, but in the Iliad, we understand we're in the world of pure myth, right? In the Aeneid, when we read Virgil's Aeneid, we're sort of in the world where we're supposed to think of this as like a realistic thing that happened. Never mind, forget. Yeah, never mind all. But so Aeneas goes out hunting and he brings down seven stags with seven shots, which is a thing that just would never, seven bow shots, which is a thing that just would never happen. Like, it's totally impossible. Um, he goes hunting and he stands up on a hill and he sees the deer on a beach. Deer don't really travel on beaches, and they don't generally travel in herds. So maybe the translation of deer is incorrect. Maybe we're supposed to think of them as, like, I don't know, wildebeests or something. But anyway, he takes seven of them down with seven shots. Also, a thing that doesn't happen. You fire one shot, they're gone. They're gone, 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 gone. But the point here is to establish the idea that not only is Aeneas the provider for his family, but he's also a hero of equal status to Achilles or to Hector. Right? This is a guy that we're supposed to think of. Why are we supposed to think that? Because Aeneas's destiny is that he will be the founding hero of Rome. So he's got to be put on the same level as the heroes that Homer portrays. He's gonna. So to be more direct about this, he's going to be the father of Rome. Okay, so he's got to be on that same level. So even though he's not, I mean, he's in the Iliad, but he's not. He's not, the same as Hector or even Paris for that matter, or Achilles or Agamemnon or Odysseus or Diomedes. Like, there's a lot of many higher sort of like many heroes that are kind of paid more attention to than Aeneas is. Um, I mean, it'll change in later poetry. Aeneas gets, he's the daughter of Venus, so he's important. But just in terms so it's like Sir Virgil has to like kind of remind us to a certain extent that Aeneas was this equally great hero. So he kills the deer, they cook the deer, they eat the deer, and then the next day out he goes and tries to scope the land, case the countryside, and he runs into his mom, Venus, who, at least to my reading, I'm sure there are others who read this differently, but at least to my reading, hilariously approaches him not as his mom, but rather as a how can I put this, a nubile young lady with her in a miniskirt, which for a Roman audience is kind of a bit taboo because proper, respectable citizen women wore clothes that went down to their ankles. And so just the fact that she's got her skirts tied up and her, her legs are visible from the knees or so, is, and then the other thing is her hair is loose, which is another, because the way that hairstyles were also a class indicator in ancient Rome for women, as well as for men, but for women in particular. So she's definitely coming as an attractive young lady, which Odysseus, forgive me, Homer, Aeneas responds to eventually, because he says, "Why can't you?" After they have their conversation, he says, "Why can't you just be my mom? Like, what? What do you like? Why do you have to come this way? Like, what? Why can't you just be my mom?" But anyway, Venus lays everything out for Odysseus. She tells him where he is, what's going to happen. I mean, and also too, like, this happens twice in book one of the Aeneid, where Aeneas's destiny is laid out really clearly. You remember, if you think back to what we were talking about earlier in book one with the shipwreck and the storm at sea with Neptune and Juno trying to kill Aeneas, Venus goes off to Jupiter and says, "Hey, you know what? What's going on here? I thought my son was supposed to, be this, person of great destiny." And in Virgil, Jupiter lays it out. I mean, he just goes right down the line. There's no suspense in Virgil's poem. After you get past the first like 250 or 300 lines, because Jupiter says, "Oh, well, I didn't notice that, but I'll save him, and then he'll make it to this new place, and then he'll found a city, and then his descendants will go on, and then there'll be Rome, and Rome will be the place that rules everything for all time." Right? This is again skipping back way earlier in the lecture. This is a little bit of Virgil's Roman propaganda that's happening in the poem itself. So, but again, it happens again because Venus again tells Aeneas, even though he doesn't know it's his mom yet, he will figure it out fairly shortly. Oh, but he's going to make his great destiny, and he has to go off to this other land, and yada yada yada. So, right. So eventually he does. He makes it. There's a new city being built called Carthage, which is something that I need to talk about in a little bit more detail. I'll do it in the next lecture. Carthage. Carthage is. Let me see. How can I explain this most? I don't know how many of you guys watch sports, but Carthage was to Rome what, the Lakers are to the Celtics, right? Or what well, I'm just going to use a Steelers reference, but we don't really have any rivals because we're the best. But the bitter, fierce rivals. And by the time Virgil's writing, Carthage doesn't even exist anymore because Rome wiped it off the map. But again, I'll get back to that in the next lecture. Yeah. So I'll pick up there next time. Again, I miss you all. I love you all. And just be safe. Don't go out. I don't know what else to say. I mean, it sucks. But I hope to see you all soon. Bye.